stay safe in a 50-50 situation in one of two ways. I can either keep my legs locked, or I can open my legs and hide my heel. Okay? If you just keep your legs locked the whole match, really not much gets done. Okay? How can I get my legs to the other side when my legs are locked? I guess it's possible, but it would be really, really difficult. So what I want to do is first I'm going to open up my legs, but I can't open up my legs like this, because then I can just expose my heel. Right? So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to open and hide my heel like so. Okay? Now when Mike goes to expose my heel, it's a very typical thing for him to do. And at the same time, take note of the fact that, guys, I'm grabbing his knee. Okay? If I'm not grabbing his knee, what he can do is he just pull the leg up. Yep. Or even worse, he could progress towards an outside senkaku, right? Up here, you can put the foot on my stomach, and then you can throw this leg over the top, and he has an outside senkaku. It's like, okay. That's what I was trying to get. So you got to grab the knee. So I'm hiding the heel and grabbing the knee. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim to put my foot in a situation where he cannot heel hook it. Okay, so as he goes to heel hook it, I'm going to take my left foot rather. I'm going to push his bicep, and then I'm going to put my foot come towards me on top of his shoulder. Okay, he can't heel hook me now, right? Now what I'm going to look to do is I take my left leg, okay, and I'm going to bring it underneath like so, okay, and now I'm going to push with the side of my left leg, and as I do that, I'm going to take my right leg, and the knee's going to suck back. Okay? Now we're in an outside senkaku. Okay? So let's look at that again. So I'm here. Now what I'm going to do is I extend my leg, like so. Now when he goes to heel hook me, I push, and I put it on top of his shoulder. Alright? Now what I do is I take my left foot, I go underneath, and as I'm doing this, I'm going to pull my right knee outside of his knee line, and I cross my legs and I lock up an outside senkaku. Okay? Now when we're here, we can now make use of the mechanic that I was talking about, where I can turn my hips to face in front of his knee. So I'm going to hold on to his knee, I'm going to hold on to his secondary leg. My left hand's at his knee, my right hand's at his ankle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on top and put my knee inside this space here. Take a look at my hips, guys. They're facing down to the front of Mike's knee. Now here, we continue to roll, and I can expose his heel very easily. Now we come back, and I land in the outside senkaku, ready to finish. Okay, so again, I'm here. I start off by extending and hiding my own leg. He goes to the heel. I push at his bicep, could be at his shoulder too, that's fine. And as I do that, what you could try to do, and I don't like doing this anymore because I think there's a lot of risk, squeeze your legs nice and tight. You could try to go here and then just pull the knee right outside the knee line. The problem is, look what just happened. Because Mike's legs were squeezed tight when I did that, I exposed my own heel, right? So what I like to do now is I'll hide, and then when he goes for it, I'll push, and then I'll put it on top of his shoulder. And then you might also, I didn't mention this before, but you might also have to do this. Look, I can take my left hand, and I'll pass it off to the other leg by going here, and then my right hand goes underneath here. That'll open up some space, and now that'll help the actions of my legs, okay? And now once we're here, let's turn it this way. So once we're here, what I'm going to do is the left hand goes from the knee. It starts at the knee. Right hand's at the ankle. I'm going to climb up, and now my left hand goes to the ankle. And now when he spins through, he cuts the heel. He may backs up here. That's fine. Backs up. Just get your legs and throw them over here. Okay. The point of having your legs over there is that now when Mike goes to come towards me, and keep him away. Right. My right leg is pushing him away. My left leg covers my right leg. Okay, so one more time through the whole sequence. So I'm here. First, I'm going to extend my leg. I'm offering him, basically I'm baiting him to look to attack. And when he does that, I can push and put my leg on top. Okay, now I switch my grips. You don't have to do this. The legs are really the more important part, but this will help, I think. You're here. Now my left leg is going to go underneath. I'm going to extend. Okay, there is sort of a heel hook here. Like if you're not paying attention, like he could grab it, but like the truth is, you're gonna, as you push, first of all, he doesn't have any legs around this leg, so even if he does catch your heel, like you can just hand fight and get it out. But what you're also doing is, look, as I'm pushing, I'm also hiding it at the same time. You guys get what I'm saying? Like it goes from a position where it's like sort of exposed for a second to a position where now it's completely hidden. Okay, so it really doesn't matter. Okay, now we start here and here. Okay, my goal now is, look, I want my hips to face the front of his knee. Think of it like kind of like a knee bar, okay? So we're gonna go from here. My left hand goes to the ankle, and now my left knee is gonna come right here, over the top, okay? And now my hips are facing into the front of his knee. Now here we continue to roll through, and we expose his heel. He never had an opportunity to hide it, okay? Now, he has two options at this point, okay? He can either backstep, which we saw last time, or he can roll back. In either situation, what I want you to do is crunch your body in and throw your legs to the other side. So we have an outside senkaku. Are you okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah, then you here, and you got your heel hook. Okay, does anybody want to see that again? You want to see it one more time? Yeah, for sure. All right, so we'll go from here again. So basically the whole thing we're trying to do is I'm just trying to get my legs to the other side in as safe a fashion as possible. To get my legs to the other side, it's going to be very, very helpful to us to get this knee outside of his knee line. Okay, so I'm first getting my leg. The trick is if I just try to pull the knee out of the, tight legs, I'm just exposing my heel, right? This is obviously completely idiotic. This is never going to work. So a better idea is you hide it first. Then you put it in a position where it's totally safe. It's totally safe right here. Okay. Now we use our arms and our legs to open up space. And now, see, because it was here as it came down, he never had a chance to gain heel exposure, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas here, he can't gain heel exposure here because I'm hiding my heel by. You can hide your heel in multiple ways. I'm hiding my heel by bringing my heel onto his ribs, right? He can't expose my heel here because it's hidden because it's like on top of his shoulder, right? It's hidden in a different way. It's still hidden, right? It is accurate to describe it that way, but you have to understand it's hidden in a different way. So here, I can hide it without putting my heel into his ribs. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, like right here, for instance, my knee. Right now, my knee is facing into his hips, which is what the mechanic we're looking for to expose someone's heel. So it should stand to reason then that he ought to be able to expose my heel, right? Well, he can't in this specific situation because it's on top of his shoulder. Right, so one thing changes everything, right? If it's here, you see it literally goes right into heel exposure, right? So what you got to do is we get it here, and now I can suck it down, right? So I'm here, and he's trying to keep his legs locked tight. Yeah, not too tight right now, but in real life he's trying to keep his legs locked tight. I'm going to push with this leg, and I pull, and that gets us what we're looking for, right? Now from here, we're going to hide this heel. So there's an interesting thing will happen if people don't actually hide their heel. It's hard to climb on top, but what's not hard to do is just lift the leg up and do that, right? So if he doesn't hide the heel right, the next step you can't really do, but hide the heel for me. Yeah, when he hides the heel, that's when you can actually climb on top. So we go from here to here, and now we roll. You see how my hips? Stop right there. Go back. See how my hips are facing into the front of his knee. Here, if he goes to hide the heel, but I hide the heel, it's like. He doesn't really have any way to do it, right? And now let's just back step, keep going. Back step. Get your legs to the other side, and you'll get your finish. Okay? Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Good. All right. Any other questions? All right. Let's get started. Okay, guys. What we're gonna do now is break down some matches, okay, that have influenced me towards thinking this way regarding this heel exposure strategy. All right. So the basic heel exposure strategy I work with. Whenever I'm in a double-seated situation, is I attempt to have my hips facing into the front of my opponent's knee. So if you see how Garry Tonon is configured around Dillon Danis' body right now, this is basically, it's literally a knee bar, okay? So at first, when I first started thinking about this strategy, when I first came up with it, I kind of thought of it as like the knee bar strategy of heel exposure, okay? The first match, which really got me started thinking about it, was this match, Garry Tonon versus Dillon Danis. We're going to look at a few others which got me thinking about it as well. Okay. And so in the technique portion of this video, we talked about upgrading from a 50-50 to an outside senkaku, which I've later concluded is one of the best ways we can enact this knee bar or hip facing into the front of our opponent's knees heel exposure strategy. Okay.
It's not exclusive to that, however. There's a pretty wide variety of situations in which this strategy can be employed, okay? We're going to do a brief overview of it. It's not going to be a super long one. In the future, I'm going to do a more at-length breakdown of this strategy, but for now, you guys will get like a small sample of it, okay? And we're also going to talk a little bit about the upgrade I discussed from 50-50 to the outside senkaku, okay? Anyway, so let's start with the match which initially got me thinking about this, okay? Garry Tonon versus Dillon Danis. So it starts off with Garry threatening a takedown. Now in ADCC rules, people are very reluctant to concede takedowns or passes or chest-to-chest pins because that's points. If you expose your own back, you turtle up or you go to a 4-point as seen here, there's no points. In scholastic wrestling, if you got taken down and you turtled up, that's still a takedown. I basically think it still should be considered a takedown. I think it's kind of a dumb rule, but regardless, those are the rules, and that does encourage certain behaviors by the athletes. They turtle up all the time. They expose their own back, which in Jiu-Jitsu we're taught is bad, but in ADCC it's the tactically correct decision because you're not getting scored on, okay? So Danis turns away, and then I don't know why he does that. Not sure on that one, guys. But anyway, he may have been looking for like a Kani Basami or something. It's kind of what it looked like. Anyway, now Garry has inside position, and he's going to sequence into... So Danis, again, turtles up. Remember, guys, I've talked about this in other videos. The major advantage of back exposure is a mobility advantage. Basically, what Danis is trying to do here is he's put his hips underneath him. Okay, he's exposed his back. But that's a trade-off. But the benefit is he can now put his hips underneath him so he can move faster. He's trying to get the fuck away from Garry. Okay, but Garry does a good job of entangling the leg, okay? And now he's in like a knee bar. Well, he literally is in a knee bar. Okay, first he gets the heel exposure. And look how, because his hips were facing into Danis's knee, he's able to gain that heel exposure. Now, let's remember, guys, whenever someone's looking for a heel hook on us, we want to hide our heels. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about the mechanics of that later in the video. But what we're going to see is that this situation here, where our hips are facing into the front of our opponent's knee, such as in a knee bar, is basically the complete opposite of what we do when we hide our heels, okay? So you can force heel exposure. So Garry here switches to the knee bar, because that's basically the situation that he's in. But what he's going to do is he's going to go back to the heel hook, and then Danis is going to backstep. Garry's going to switch to a 50-50, and Garry's going to get his finish. And it all started from the heel exposure being able to be attained from the angle of his hips facing into the front of Danis's knee. We're going to see it. It all really comes down to, are the offensive man's hips facing into the front or the back of the defensive man's knee, okay? So let's see here. And he gets the finish. You see how right here, his hips are facing into the front of Danis's knee, and that enables the heel literally just slides right into place. It goes right into place, and Garry gets the finish. All right. Now another person who influenced me towards this way of thinking was, as you can see here, Lachlan Giles. Okay, this is a video of him rolling at 10th Planet Austin. I hope they're okay with me breaking this down, but it was a very influential video on me. Watching Lachlan in these rolls pushed me into thinking in a lot of ways about leg locks. Okay, now I would say more so than his ADCC matches, to be honest. I think this is a better video than those matches. So here, take a look at what Lachlan's going to do. They're in a double-seated situation. Now, what we're going to see throughout this video is that it's really in a double-seated situation that this mechanic finds its most prominent use. You could hypothetically use it against a standing opponent, but it would be very difficult because the truth is it wouldn't be too hard for the man to simply put his foot on the mat and therefore hide his heel in that fashion. In such situations, we usually see pressure to the back of the knee as being the primary mechanism we use to expose a heel, okay? For instance, such as in the backside 50-50, people like Ryan Hall, Lachlan Giles have used that very prominently, or as in the far hip Ashi, where people like Garry Tonon or Husamo Palhares, they've used that very, very successfully. Okay, these are both forms of Ashigurami which put pressure to the back of the knee against a standing opponent. However, in a double-seated situation, that's quite difficult. So instead, what we see is, take a look at the angle of Lachlan's hips. I mean, it's literally facing directly into the knee. Okay, now this is a little bit different than the situation with Garry, where Garry had his legs wrapped around Danis's, leg. Lachlan doesn't have that here. It's okay. Lachlan uses his hand here to maintain control of the knee line. Okay, and now see, look, he's literally able to gain heel exposure just by grasping the heel. There's no way for this guy to defend. He can't hide his heel. Okay, and now he makes the same mistake Danis made. Dallas he makes the same mistake Danis made, and he backsteps, and that enables Lachlan to just go right into a 50-50 and get a finish. And see how he keeps his foot in front, so he can't come forward to hand fight. Okay, that's like a basic principle of modern 50-50 play, I would say. So let's look at this one more time. Take a look at how currently Lachlan's hips are facing into the back of this man's knee. Okay, not the front, the back. That means this heel is hidden. If Lachlan were to dig for this heel, maybe if this guy doesn't know what he's doing, he could expose himself, and then Lachlan gets the heel exposure he's looking for. Okay, fair enough. But do we want to rely on that? Do we want to rely on guys like not knowing how to hide their heel when they should be able to? No, that's not something we want to rely on. We want to be able to proactively force heel exposure against intelligent resistance. Okay, now one way we can do that in a double-seated situation is by turning our hips to face the front of our opponent's knee, such as in here. Now here, there's nothing this guy can do to hide his heel. You could take someone who has the best heel hook defense in the world, put him in this situation, and he, cannot hide his heel. He might be able to free his knee from the knee line because there's no entanglement here, right? But if we're just talking about heel exposure, there's no way you can hide your heel here. Okay, Lachlan gets the heel exposure, and he's able to get the finish. All right. Now we're going to talk about one more example of Lachlan. So here, Lachlan's in a key master guard. He goes into a K guard, and he entangles the leg, and his opponent intelligently backsteps. That is what I would recommend in that situation, because here there is pressure. Actually, he never really even gets to the point. If Lachlan's able to get to a backside 50-50 here, there'd be pressure to the back of this person's knee, which would then enable Lachlan, because this is a kneeling opponent, there'd be space for Lachlan to put pressure to the back of the knee and expose the heel. Okay, so she backsteps, and now there's really not much space behind her knee, and so that mechanic is no longer feasible. I mean, it's possible, but it's very, very difficult. You're not working with a lot of space. You want a lot of space in order to make use of that mechanic. Okay, space behind the knee. Okay, now instead, what Lachlan's going to do, take a look what happens. So he threatens the heel hook in one direction. She rolls, and her roll literally gave him the heel hook. How did that work? Well, take a look at right here. Again, it's all about the relationship between Lachlan's hips and his opponent's leg, specifically his opponent's knee. Right now, his hips are facing into the back of his opponent's knee. Okay, now watch. As she rolls, right there, right here. Now her knee is facing directly into his hips, and it's right here that Lachlan's able to gain the heel exposure. Just as before, right? You can't really see it here because of the angle of the camera, but it's literally the same thing as right here. Okay, knee facing into the hips, you can gain the heel. Okay, same exact thing. Right here, she's gonna roll, and when she rolls, she over rotates. She rotated too much. She shouldn't have rotated this much because now she's turned her knee to face into his hips. Big mistake. And then she rolls all the way through, gets the finish. Now, when I first started thinking about this strategy, okay, I was trying to figure out how I could make use of it essentially from a cross Ashi, okay? And we're going to see in this match, I do succeed in using it, but I want to talk to you guys about like why I have stopped doing it in this situation, okay? What I think my opponent could have done to me, which, fortunately for me, he didn't, but I think he could have hypothetically. All right, so here, I go to come up to threaten a sweep. He comes into me to block the sweep, and then I go through and I hit a Kanibasami. Okay, if you guys have my Kanibasami instructional, that's like a strategy which I recommend pretty frequently. You chain sweeps and Kanibasamis together. All right, so I get my Kanibasami. Now here, finishing up, locking it up. Now I'm going to use a grip on the heel, and my hips coming forward. So I pull the heel back, and my hips come forward in order to threaten the man going down to his hips. I think I succeed here. Yep, I put the man down on his hips. Now here I'm going to roll. And you see how I've turned my left knee to the inside so that my hips are facing into his knee? So I did this explicitly. I did this like deliberately. I'm trying to expose the heel using the mechanic that I saw first Garry and then Lachlan making use of. Okay, and I was trying to do it from a cross Ashi. And here it works, but I don't recommend doing this anymore for two reasons. One, first of all, it's hard to keep your legs locked tight on the inside, which means that it's hard to keep your legs locked tight on the inside when you rotate this much, because my legs are not really locked super tight here. You see, there's kind of a lot of space here. He could have hypothetically, I think he maybe could have not tapped to this. I'm not sure. Maybe there would have been damage. It's hard to say, but he maybe could have pulled his knee out. Okay, maybe he could have brought his hips to the mat, taken this leg, brought it over, and pushed right here at my hamstring and pulled his knee out. It's possible I would have adjusted and got the finish anyway, but that's something he could have possibly tried. Even worse for me would have been, what if he backstepped over with this leg and threatened a back take? Okay, I'm going to put out another video pretty soon where I outline that strategy of taking someone's back. Craig Jones is very, very good at it. He did that against John Blank at ADCC 2019. In addition to Felipe Pena, is obviously very good at that back exposure strategy as well. He does it a little differently, but it's the same basic strategy. That strategy operates off of the position I've put my own body into. This is basically a turtle, okay? I basically put myself into a turtle position, okay? And so for that reason, I have veered away from using this from a cross Ashi. Cross Ashi is one of my favorite positions, but I won't really use it to expose the heel in the fashion that I'm describing in this video, right? Even though I did it here, yeah. So if I don't do it in cross Ashi, where do I do it now? Well, I do it in 50-50. That's 50-50 or outside Ashi. We're going to talk about both of those in this video. All right. So now we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of the specific technique that we outlined earlier in this video, right? Which is going from a 50-50 to get to an outside senkaku. Okay. Now, when you're trying to get to an outside senkaku from a 50-50, there's two things you've got to do. You've got to be able to open your legs in a way that's safe and get your legs to the other side. And if you want to be able to make use of this mechanic that we're talking about, where you face your hips to the front of your opponent's knee, you got to be able to climb on top of his hips in a side-to-side fashion. Okay? I won't go too in-depth on this concept because it's outside the scope of this video, but I ultimately view any double-seated Ashigarami battle as being a battle over hip height. Okay? Hip height can manifest in two ways. It can go forwards and backwards or side-to-side, left to right. Okay? Here, to expose the heel, we're going to want to go left to right. All right. Now, first thing I do, there's more than one way to do this, but one of the things I do here to keep my heel safe is I put it on top of his shoulder. Now, my left hand is controlling his knee, so he can't escape that from my knee line. All right. Now, what I'm going to do, Vic, my training partner here, is very good. He see, I'm trying to thread that foot underneath there in the fashion I describe in the technique portion of the video. Vic knows that's coming. He rolls with me all the time, so he's going to work on inhibiting my leg from coming underneath. See how I'm trying to fit it underneath there? Yeah, but I upgrade from one shoulder. There's more than one way to skin a cat, guys. I go from one shoulder to the other shoulder. All right. Now there's enough space here to safely bring my knee down. All right. So I bring my knee down. I put it on top of his stomach. But now he's doing a good job of controlling this leg. If he controls this leg, I'm not going to be able to get my hips up and over and face my hips to face the front of his knee, which is what I'm looking for, again, to expose his heel. So it's going to hold me off for a moment. Now, let's talk a little bit about climbing on top of the man's hips in relation to what he's doing with his leg. Basically, he can do one of two things with this leg here, his primary leg. He can either curl the leg with the heel coming in. That'll raise the knee. If you do that, it's easier to gain immediate heel exposure, but it's harder to climb on top because he's created a wedge with his thigh here. If he hides the heel, which is he extends the leg and turns the heel into my ribs, okay, therefore putting the back of his knee to face the front of my hips, he's making it easier for me to climb on top. So there's a dichotomy here. He's either going to raise his knee and create a wedge, making it difficult for me to climb on top, okay? In which case, however, it is a little bit easier to expose the heel, okay? If you're really big like Vic is, you can kind of get away with doing that because you can like dig your heel and your foot into the mat, and it's kind of hard to get the foot off the mat and expose it. But if you're small, this strategy will like literally never work. You know, if you put me against someone small and they try that, I'm going to expose their heel. Against someone small, they're going to have to like actually hide their heel by extending the leg and turning the heel into my ribs. Okay. But anyway, so there's that dichotomy there. And as 50-50 players, we have to be good at getting past it. We got to recognize which of these two reactions our opponent is giving us and understand what weapons we can use to get past it. All right, so see that right there? He raised that. He's doing that on purpose. He's doing that to create a wedge so I can't climb on top of him. He's blocking my left leg from coming over the top. You know, he knows what I'm trying to do. All right, and he also knows if he keeps this foot planted, he's got to keep the foot flat. He'll stay safe. All right. Now, but it got a little too dicey for him. He probably felt as if the foot on the mat wasn't enough to keep himself safe. And he goes into a true position where he can hide his heel. Okay, now his hips are facing into, my hips are facing into the back of his knee. All right. That means I can't expose his heel right away. But because the leg's extended here for his heel to be hidden, there's no wedge and I can climb on top. And you see how, look at that. I turn my hips to face into his knee. This is I think a much safer way to do this than in a cross Ashi, because here I have my legs pinching. It's much, much tighter, okay? And in addition, it's way harder for him to take my back. Because my knees are pinching tighter, if he frees his knee from my knee line, 100% he could take my back, okay? That option would be available to him. However, because it's difficult to do because I'm pinching my knees tighter, and I'm able to pinch my knees tighter because of the situation, the Ashigurami that I'm in, because I'm in a 50-50. It's way easier to pinch your knees tighter here than in a cross Ashi. If my legs were on the inside, the legs wouldn't be able to pinch as tight, okay? At least if I was facing into the front of his knee, all right? And so we see here, I expose his heel, which is what I'm looking for the whole time. He's so good at leg lock defense, he actually slips. If you guys saw right there. Vic does a good job of backstepping and slipping. And I regain control of the secondary leg. And what I want to do is I want to take my left leg and I want to put it in the pocket of the space right there. So we're going to see that's what I do right here. And I turn. Now, again, my hips are facing into his knee. And honestly, like, the wall helps me. There's a wall here, so you can't backstep anymore. And I got the finish. But, yeah. Anyway, so let's look at this one more time. So first he's got this wedge in front. You'll see this less frequently against smaller people, because the truth is, if he was smaller, I could take my left arm, grab his ankle, pull it up, and just take the heel exposure right there. He can't hide it. or as I go to do that, the threat of that forces him to hide his heel, which is basically what happened here. Now, so he hides the heel, and that enables me, as soon as there's no wedge blocking me from climbing on top, that's exactly what I'm going to do, okay? And I take a look at how I take my knee here. It's really all about the knee going in the pocket right here. And that allows me to turn. Basically, I switch my hips. I go from my right hip facing the mat to my left hip facing the mat. This is basically like a backside 50-50, okay? It's kind of like it's a little different because of where Vic's leg is. It's almost like a knee bar backside 50-50 hybrid, okay? You know, I talked about how pressure to the back of the knee is going to be the main mechanic we use to expose people's heel when they're standing over us. That is true, but there's some sense in which these two mechanics that I recommend, there's some crossover, right? Pressure to the back of the knee and having our hips face into the front of our opponent's knee. They do, it's like a Venn diagram, right? There's a little bit of crossover between the two of them. But anyway, that's how I'm able to get Vic's heel in this situation. We're going to look at one more time when I succeeded in doing this against Vic in a roll. By the way, guys, there's a whole video of me breaking down these two rolls with Vic. They're really, really useful because Vic is like super sound defensively. Okay, this kid has like massive potential. I'm really looking forward to see what he achieves in his career. He's super young, super athletic, super intelligent, way more potential than me. It's not even close. He's going to be way better than I am. But regardless, go check out those videos. They're in the archives of this YouTube channel. So anyway, so we're going to look at, again, basically the same sequence, except this time there's one major difference, which is interesting to look at. Well, let's just let the whole thing play and then we'll talk about it. So I don't know if you guys picked up on what the big difference was. The big difference here, more or less the same exact thing is happening, with the exception of two things are different, but there's only one that's really super important. Here, my heel's not on top of his shoulder. It's in front of his shoulder. Guys, that gets the job done just fine. He can't heel hook it. That's the main goal we're looking for. However, take a look at my left leg. That's very different what happens. I bring it over for the outside senkaku, and he strips it off, and he controls my ankle. But I don't care. It's not important. All I care about is this knee going in the pocket right here. Because all I care about is getting my hips to face the front of his knee. If I can achieve that, I can achieve what I'm looking for, which is a very good angle to expose his heel. Okay? And to be able to get it. Now we're going to look at a roll with another training partner of mine, Jason. Jason is very, very good at leg lock defense, just like Vic. I mean, we pretty much all are under on the Renzo Gracie team. We pretty much all have good leg lock defense because we're so used to facing off against good leg lockers day in and day out. All right? So it's never easy to get these guys. Now, Jason does a good job of maintaining. What Jason wants to be the case is he wants to maintain the relationship between his leg and my hips right now. Right now, he's safe. Okay, the back of his knee is facing into my hips. Okay, this is what he wants. This is to his advantage right now because he's safe. And you see how he's posting at my ankle. Okay, he's going to try to free this leg, heist his hips. He could potentially threaten a back take or just get the fuck out. Okay, I'm going to roll with him. And what we're going to see here is I adjust the relationship of my hips to his leg. Okay? So I notice he's rotating really hard one way. Now I hold his knee and I allow him to rotate independent of me such that his hips pass over and his knee passes over. It faces into the front of my hips right here. And here's where I gain the heel exposure. Right there. Now here he does a good job. He takes his secondary leg. He starts pushing right here. So what I have to do is I switch from this cross Ashi to a 50-50. Okay, so I put pressure to the back of his knee. And that allows me to retain the knee line. Okay. This is the same exact strategy as Lachlan used back here. Here, right? So here it's in 50-50. I did it there in cross Ashi. Same thing. Just as good. It's just as good, but it's important to keep in mind. It's funny. He started in 50-50 and finished in cross Ashi. I started in cross Ashi and finished in 50-50. Anyway, so I mentioned I don't like using this strategy in cross Ashi. That's okay. The example I'm showing with Jason is different because I'm not actually turning. He's turning for me. Okay, so that's like a reactive method. So you basically, if you want to proactively implement this strategy, I recommend doing it in a 50-50. But if you want to reactively implement it, you can use it almost anywhere. If he's giving it to you, if he is rotating his hips in such a way that it's going to put his knee pointing to the front of your hips, you can do it anywhere. He's doing it for you, so don't worry about it. It's just when you try to proactively implement it in the fashion that I did here, it worked out for me here, but I think there's a lot of counters which could have made this go really bad for me, which I'm going to outline those counters in a future video. So if you're curious, stay tuned. They will be posted. But anyway, so one more time, let's look at what I did to Jason. And I allow him to rotate and I catch the heel. It's all about the relationship between my hips and the front of his knee. Now, so far, we've only looked at inside heel hooks, okay? But I mentioned that this same strategy can be used just as effectively for outside heel hooks. I don't want to go too in-depth on it. This video is getting too long enough as it is. But let's look at one great example of my teammate, Damian Anderson, who I consider to be one of the best people at using this strategy from an outside Ashi, where he's going to take his hips and turn them to the front of his opponent's knee. It's funny, I was thinking about this the other day. When I first came to Renzo's, one of the first things I ever got good at was I'd go to outside Ashi, and then I would climb my hips on top of my opponent's, turn my hips to face the front of his knee, gain the heel exposure, and then finish the outside heel hook. But I stopped doing it. You know, I figured that out, but I stopped doing it. All right, and but now I've come back, and I've realized how valuable it was. I should have been doing it the whole time. Anyway. So we're going to see here, Damian's got an outside Ashi, and you see how, look at how he turns his hips to face the front of his opponent's knee, and that enables him to catch the heel. Unfortunately, he doesn't finish his heel hook, but we're not really looking at finishes now, we're looking at heel exposure, all right? So he gets to the outside Ashi, and he turns, and see how, again, guys, it's all about the hip height. If he can get the hip height that he's looking for, all right, clearly his hips are over his opponent's, he's able to turn his hips to face into the front of his opponent's knee, and that's going to enable him to gain heel exposure right here, okay? In the future, I will break down this from outside Ashi much more at length. This is just a small sample of it. Anyway, I don't want to let this video get any longer. hopefully you guys found this useful. If you guys are interested in seeing any other things, comment down below what you'd like to see, and I'll make a video on it.